We moved into the silent house on a cold November day. It was a big old mansion that had been abandoned for years. The realtor said it was a bargain, and we needed a fresh start after the accident that took our son's life. Our daughter Lily was 6 years old and had survived the crash with only minor injuries. She was a sweet, cheerful girl who loved to draw and play with her dolls. She seemed to like the new house, especially the spacious attic where she could have her own room. The first night, we heard her talking to someone in her room. We thought she was just playing with her toys, so we didn't bother her. She came down for breakfast the next morning with a smile on her face. "Who were you talking to last night, honey?" I asked her. She looked at me with her big blue eyes and said, "My new friend. He lives in the attic. He says his name is Zozo." I exchanged a glance with my husband, Mark. We assumed it was an imaginary friend, something common for children who had gone through trauma. We decided to play along and not make a big deal out of it. "That's nice, dear," I said. "What does Zozo look like?" She shrugged and said, "He doesn't have a face. He says he can change his shape. Sometimes he's a shadow. Sometimes he's a spider. Sometimes he's a snake." I felt a chill run down my spine. That didn't sound like a normal, imaginary friend. It sounded like something out of a horror movie. "Does he scare you?" I asked. She shook her head and said, "No, he's nice. He tells me stories and plays games with me. He says he likes me." I forced a smile and said, "Well, as long as he's nice to you, I guess it's okay." Mark nodded and said, "Yeah, maybe he'll help you cope with the loss of your brother." We didn't want to admit it, but we were both worried about Lily. She had been very close to her brother, Jake, who was 8 years old when he died. He had been her protector and best friend. She rarely talked about him or the accident, and we didn't know how to help her. We hoped that moving to a new place would give her a chance to heal and make new friends. But instead, she seemed to isolate herself more and more, spending hours in the attic with Zozo. We tried to get her to join us for family activities, like watching movies, playing board games, or going for walks. But she always refused, saying she wanted to stay with Zozo. We tried to get her to socialize with other kids in the neighborhood, but she didn't seem interested. She said they were boring and mean, and that Zozo was the only one who understood her. We tried to get her to see a therapist, but she threw a tantrum and said she hated us. She said we didn't care about her or Zozo, and that we wanted to take him away from her. We were at a loss. We didn't know what to do to help her. We loved her more than anything, but we felt like we were losing her to Zozo. Things got worse as time went by. We started to notice strange things happening in the house. Lights flickering, doors slamming, objects moving by themselves. We heard noises in the night like scratching, hissing, and whispering. We felt cold spots and gusts of wind in the rooms. We smelled rotten eggs and sulfur in the air. We thought it was just the old house acting up, or maybe our imagination playing tricks on us. We tried to ignore it and focus on our work and our daughter, but we couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One night, we heard Lily screaming from her room. We ran upstairs and found her on the floor, clutching her stomach. She was pale and sweaty, and blood was dripping from her mouth. "Mommy, Daddy, help me," she cried. "Zozo is hurting me." We panicked and called 911. We tried to comfort her and ask her what happened. She said Zozo had gotten angry with her for talking to us. He said she belonged to him and no one else. He had possessed her body and made her do things she didn't want to do. He had made her hurt herself and others. We didn't know what to make of her words. We thought she was hallucinating or having a nightmare. But when the ambulance arrived and took her to the hospital, we saw something that made us question our sanity. As they carried Lily out on the stretcher, we saw a dark figure standing behind her, hovering in the air. It had no face, but we could feel its malevolent energy. It was Zozo, the imaginary friend, or whatever it was that had taken residence in our house and our daughter's mind. We didn't know what to do next. We didn't know how to protect our daughter from this entity or how to get rid of it. We felt helpless and hopeless, trapped in a nightmare that had no end. We spent the night in the hospital, praying for Lily's recovery and trying to make sense of what had happened. But when we returned home, we found that things had escalated even further. The house was no longer silent. It was alive with evil. The walls were oozing black slime. The windows were shattered. The furniture was smashed, and the air was thick with smoke and screams. We heard Lily's voice calling to us from the attic, but we couldn't get to her. The stairs had disappeared and the door was sealed with blood. We realized then that we were not alone in the house. There were other spirits, other entities, other horrors that had been unleashed by Zozo's presence. We were trapped in a hellish dimension, a realm of madness and despair, where the dead and the living were one and the same. We knew then that we had made a mistake in moving into this house. We had unleashed a curse that had been dormant for years, waiting for the right victims to awaken it. We knew then that we had to leave this house, this town, this life behind. We had to escape before it was too late, before we were consumed by the darkness. We grabbed a few things, took Lily's hand and ran out of the house, never looking back. We drove for hours until we reached a motel in a distant town. We locked ourselves in a room, turned on all the lights, and held each other tightly. We didn't know what the future held for us, but we knew one thing for sure. We would never forget the silent house on the hill, the house that had taken our son's life, our daughter's sanity, and our souls. The house that was now a prison of nightmares, a portal to hell, a curse on our lives. For just $3 a month, you can have your name featured in my YouTube videos and descriptions. Not only will you be supporting my channel, but you'll also be immortalized in the credits of my content. If you're looking for something a bit more personalized, consider becoming a $25 a month patron. I'll voice your stories and bring them to life on my channel. Create a special drawing just for you, or even write a unique story tailored to your interests. So don't hesitate. Join my patron community today and help me keep the spooky stories coming. And remember, together we can save each other from the YouTube algorithm. Thank you for your support.